Welcome to our program on managing bed bugs with limited resources. This is Shonda Bennett with the EPA Center for Integrated Pest Management, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator. This webinar is part of a series featuring experts who provide information on practical strategies for establishing and improving integrated pest management programs. EPA recommends IPM programs because they provide smart, sensible, and sustainable strategies for managing pests and emphasize the safe use of pesticides. Today, we'll be discussing strategies for managing bed bugs with limited resources. While there are many products and services available to deal with bed bug infestations, many people, due to physical or financial constraints, are unable to access these resources. Our experts will be covering bedbug management using readily available, low-cost tactics based on integrated pest management principles. Please note that the views expressed by our presenters are for educational purposes only and do not represent the official views or positions of EPA or the presenters' organizations. I'd like now to introduce our distinguished presenters. Dr. Stephen Kells is a professor and extension entomologist with the University of Minnesota. His research strives to improve IPM practices by understanding pest biology and evaluating and improving prevention and control practices. Dr. Changlu Wang is the extension specialist in entomology for Rutgers University. His research focuses on developing cost-effective and environmental-friendly urban pest management technologies. Dr. Marcia Anderson is an environmental protection specialist with the EPA Center for Integrated Pest Management. She has previously worked with the EPA Region 2 office as a pesticide compliance assistant specialist. At this time, we will now hear from Dr. Marcia Anderson.
To set the stage for my presentation, I'd like to begin by discussing some of the hurdles that we face when we're talking about effective bedbug management. First is the social stigma. While people of all social classes struggle with bedbugs in their homes, few are forthcoming with such information. The willingness to seek help and be open about the problem are good first steps toward finding solutions. Help from qualified pest management professionals is often needed to resolve stubborn bedbug infestations. However, in some rural areas, access to pest management professionals may be limited. In cities, as well as small towns and communities, people can be found living in close proximity, whether it be in multifamily housing like apartments or situations in which large extended families are sharing a residence. The comings and goings of occupants increase the opportunity for bedbug introduction and spread. Easy access to information on bedbugs and effective treatment options is critical for ensuring informed decision-making around bedbug problems. Knowing your options and the pros and cons in each will help you find the most effective approach to your situation. Finally, dealing with bedbugs can pose resource challenges, including time and money. I hope this presentation will provide information on some bedbug control options that can be effective for you if there are resource constraints. First step in implementing bedbug control is to ensure that an insect pest that you've discovered is in fact a bedbug. Different insects have different habitats, habits, characteristics, and require different control strategies. Proper identification can save time, anxiety, and money. But the only way to confirm a bedbug is to find live bedbugs, collect a few, and have a professional identify them. So let's take a little test of your bedbug knowledge and see if you can identify which of the bugs on your screen is a bedbug. So actually, there are two bedbugs here. Numbers 3 and 6 are our bedbug culprits. Note just how different the adult bedbug looks from the nymph or juvenile unfed bedbug. The other photos are of a ticker cockroach and nymph and carpet beetles. The adult bedbug is mahogany in color. It's about the size of an apple seed, wingless. They do not jump or fly, but they do use their 6 legs to scurry very quickly across surfaces. There are 5 juvenile stages called instars. The dark color in the abdomen is the blood remaining after a feeding. They shed their skins after each molt. And finally, there are the tiny 1 to 2 millimeter eggs that are often glued to rough surfaces. Now let's take a closer look at bedbugs and their habits. They aggregate together in cracks and crevices all day. They become most active at night, usually between about 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. But if they're hungry, they'll come out earlier, and once they sense a warm body nearby, they're going to travel about 15 to 20 feet from their hiding places up onto the bed, have a meal, and then scurry back to their hiding place. Adults can survive over 6 months without feeding. So how do bedbugs feed? Well, bedbugs have this long straw-like proboscis that pierces the skin like a mosquito. But unlike a mosquito, when they penetrate the skin, they inject anticoagulant and anesthetic saliva to the wound. This will allow the bedbug to suck up blood without waking the victim. This is what causes varying degrees of inflammation. Bedbugs also have this very unique physiology, which allows their bodies to expand like an accordion, as you see here, enabling them to gorge themselves with blood. They feed on host blood for about 3 to 10 minutes, and then they run away, often voiding parts of previous meals while feeding. This anticoagulant and anesthetic saliva that they inject to the skin is what causes the varying degrees of inflammation. For many people, the bites go unnoticed, but for others, bites can be extremely itchy, showing up most commonly upon awakening, since bedbugs mainly feed during the night and early morning hours. But not everybody reacts to the bites the same way. A person's reaction to bedbugs may change over time, not reacting at first, but then reacting after being bitten many times. When bites appear, bedbugs are not the only possibility. Scabies is a condition where mites burrow into the skin, resulting in lesions and open sores. This occurs on the hands, wrists, and elbows, but can be all over the body. Scabies must be diagnosed through microscopic examination of skin scrapings taken from the edge of the affected area. Bites from other pests, though, are often confused with bedbugs, and they include bird mites. They will bite people, but do not burrow into the skin. They're usually present when birds nest in vents, windowsills, or near air conditioning units of a living space. Rodent mites may also bite humans. Fleas can be present when domestic or even wild animals are living in or close to the home. See the bites to the right. And then there's chiggers. See left and center. And you can see their bites. It's important that you recognize the difference between a bedbug introduction and an infestation. An introduction is a single bug or a group of bugs that are not breeding, such as a single or multiple male bugs. An infestation is a reproducing population. Here you can view the eggs present in the lower photograph and various nymphal stages. What do you do if you think that you may have bedbugs in your home, school, or shelter? First, don't panic. Make sure that you actually have a bedbug. Catch one, place it in a plastic bag or jar for identification. Then contact your local environmental health office for assistance. I'll discuss some control measures in just a few minutes. Protecting the health of all people is important to the Environmental Protection Agency. Children, the elderly, and health-impaired persons face increased risks to their health when they're unnecessarily exposed to pests and pesticides. For this reason, the EPA recommends and promotes the safe use of pesticides and integrated pest management programs. The foundation of the IPM pyramid is shown here: education and communication. The next step is conducting cultural and sanitation practices, including non-chemical methods of control first. By non-chemical methods, we mean the physical methods, including vacuuming, exclusion, clutter removal, and placing traps. Thermal, extremes of heat and cold, including steam. Non-chemical methods are followed by chemical controls. A pest management professional is strongly recommended when bedbug pesticide applications are necessary. Now we're going to discuss more of the steps in relation to bedbugs. In your home, school, or community, if a bedbug is found, check the surrounding area thoroughly for more bedbugs and collect a specimen if possible. Inspect bedrooms, bed mechanisms, floors, walls, behind or under furniture, closets, or other storage areas and belongings. And just because you don't find them doesn't mean they're not there. Know the visual inspections are highly unreliable when it comes to detecting low-level infestations. Bedbugs are experts at hiding in the tiniest of cracks and crevices. When looking for bedbugs, make sure you have good lighting. Use a flashlight whose light beam can be seen even when the lights are on, preferably a bright LED type. Have a magnifying glass, preferably a 10 power. A mirror is very handy for looking behind or under heavy furniture. You can also use compressed air, like that for cleaning computers, and for flushing bed bugs from cracks and crevices. A probe, such as a credit card tool, can be made by cutting a plastic card into a long triangle for checking into narrow spaces. Have some plastic zip-top bags handy for collecting specimens. Using tape or a sticky lint roller makes it easier to catch the bed bugs and then seal them in the plastic bag. Here's what else to look for: dark and rusty colored droppings. That's the voided material leaving the blood stains, and blood stains from crushed bugs. You've got eggs and eggshells, although very small, will be found among droppings or in crevices where adults hide. And then there's the shed skins. Other common pests, such as scabies, fleas, or mites, will not produce the same telltale signs of the bed bugs on sheets or linens. Did you know that over 70% of bed bugs are located in bed-related areas? For a thorough mattress inspection, you need to look under the top and bottom seams and along the edge of the piping. Look under the mattress handles, along air holes, under buttons and labels. Then look between the mattress and box spring, platform, or frame, which you can see Dr. Wang in the center photo. For plush furniture, look at and under legs of chairs and couches. Inspect pillows and cushions, particularly the seams, the folds around zippers, and the edges of cushions. Pay attention to the staples, tacks, and buttons. What about headboards and bed frames? Bed bugs will hide in the crevices on wood, metal, and plastic frames, or where the mattresses touch the frame. Nearly anywhere there are cracks or crevices can be a hiding place for bed bugs and their eggs. Upholstered couches and chairs are next at over 22%. Yes, they can hide almost anywhere. Remember that 34% of bed bugs are found on the box spring. Here's a closer look at these infestations. The bed bugs easily crawl from the protection of the box spring to their blood source, and then quickly crawl back and hide out for about a week until they get hungry again. And that's on the left. On the right, a really good example of a mattress infestation. Once established, Bed bugs will spread toward the perimeter of the room, the walls, the molding, the rugs, and they can also hide among items stored under beds and behind moldings. Fold back the edges of wall-to-wall carpets to inspect for signs of bed bugs, and pay attention to the tack strip of carpets and look under the edge of area rugs. Did you realize that bed bugs can also walk through walls from one room to another through electric outlets and running along the internal wires? They can also move through wall voids to adjacent floors above and below. This is why it's very important to check any adjoining rooms, side to side or up and down. It's important to inspect mobility assistance devices, such as wheelchairs for bed bugs. Because many elderly, disabled, and infirm persons are confined to wheelchairs, the chairs should be inspected and cleaned regularly by caregivers, as they can become a convenient bedbug harborage and vehicle of dispersal. Also, because some people are not fully mobile, they become convenient victims of hungry bedbugs. Take a look at this yellow arrow pointing to the bedbug in the wheel of the wheelchair. Isolate the beds by pulling it away from the wall, curtains, and other furniture. Put each bed leg in an interceptor or monitor. For beds without legs, place block leg raisers under the bed frame. These are easily available at your local hardware store, or you can make your own by cutting small chunks of wood and then place them into the interceptors. Using monitors is very important for detecting and controlling bed bugs, especially in residences that have a history of bed bugs. These bed bug detectors are commercially available. Interceptor traps placed under or next to bed legs will catch bed bugs, as will traps placed under the bed legs. The proportion of adult bed bugs caught in traps can vary from one type of trap to another. Some bed bug interceptors are sold with baits, lures, or with carbon dioxide attractants that will catch even more bed bugs. Interceptors with such lures will provide 1 to 2 months of enhanced attraction and capture. Sticky traps, however, are not for bed bugs. They're effective in catching spiders and cockroaches and other insects, as shown in the photo on the screen. Sticky traps are inexpensive, discreet, and easy to place. However, they don't catch many bed bugs and are easily moved, displaced, or lost. Vacuuming is more important than you think. Vacuuming is an effective control method in combination with other methods, especially when the infestation is light to moderate. Initiate a regular and often home vacuum pattern, especially under beds, in closets, and in corners. Vacuuming not only removes the bugs, but also cleans up bedbug skins. Studies have shown that bedbugs are attracted to other bedbugs and shed skins. And in fact, the skins can protect live bedbugs from chemical treatments. Immediately seal and dispose of the vacuum bags, otherwise the bedbugs may just crawl out again. Empty bagless vacuums into garbage outside. Placing clothes in a hot dryer is probably the easiest bedbug control method. While washing all potentially infested clothing may wash away some of the bed bugs, but it won't kill them. The use of the dryer is the best. In fact, you could forego the washer entirely and just use the dryer on high heat. Do not mix newly dried clothes with undried ones. And be careful that the cloth laundry bags are treated also. They're placed in the dryer along with the clothing. Plastic bags should be thrown away. Don't reuse them. And nothing is more effective for killing bed bugs than a hot dryer. Dry clothing can be tumbled in a loosely filled dryer set on high for 30 minutes. Sealing harborages is very important for bedbug control to eliminate their hiding places and to get them out into the open space. Use silicone caulk to seal cracks and crevices. Create a perimeter barrier. Pay attention to walls that are shared with other homes. Be sure that the plates covering the wall openings are in place and sealed. If sealing baseboards, don't forget to do both the top and the bottom. Now, let's discuss shelters or high-capacity dwellings or dwellings with extended families. Although you may not always be able to prevent bed bugs from being brought into a home or shelter, there's the possibility of containing them once they get there. Clear plastic storage containers can be used to store clients' essential belongings indoors, as well as other non-essential belongings destined for a storage room. Labeling containers eliminate the problem of clients' possessions contacting each other in areas where bedbugs might climb from one item onto another. The smooth interior of the container makes it difficult for the bedbugs to climb, so wandering bedbugs are likely to fall into the bottom of the container. Items can easily be seen through the plastic, and the containers can also be inspected periodically for bedbugs or other pests. Pesticides are an effective component of a bedbug IPM program if carefully selected and used properly. Remember that pesticides are just one IPM tool and rarely control bedbugs alone. If not used properly, pesticides can place you and your family at risk and add to your problem rather than to solve it. Only use EPA-registered pesticides. Those have an EPA registration number on the label, and only buy those whose labels say that they control bedbugs. Always read and follow the label directions carefully. Never use pesticides indoors that are labeled for outdoor use, and more is not better. What else won't work for bedbug control? Well, there's rubbing alcohol, kerosene, and gasoline are not effective against bedbugs and could harm you and your family and can easily ignite with a spark or cigarette. Some natural oils and home remedies have not been proven effective at controlling bedbugs. Do not apply pesticides and repellents to clothing and skin for bedbugs. And home refrigerators are not cold enough to kill the bedbugs unless the temperature is maintained at 0 degrees or under for 3 days or more. What to discard from infested locations? Discard only severely infested items that may be hard to clean. Upholstered furniture or rattan furniture are the hardest items to clean and often the best to dispose of. In most cases, infested items do not have to be thrown away. Most items can be treated to kill bed bugs and then continue to be used. Now I'm going to pass on this presentation to Dr. Kells, who will discuss his work in remote areas and tribal communities.
Great, thank you very much. I would like to talk about, as Dr. Anderson mentioned, some of the work that we had done and experiences that we had around tribal and rural communities. I just want to say before I start, please note I'm not aware of all situations and circumstances. Bed bugs can get into some pretty interesting areas. And in the 25 minutes that I have or so, I'm not going to be able to cover all of possible situations and all possible circumstances where we would see them. My knowledge of tribal communities is rather limited. I understand and realize that there's quite a variety in situations when it comes to the tribal communities. And my experience has largely been limited to protecting communities related to casino guests, believe it or not, and their importation of bed bugs that eventually make it into the community. And then I've also dealt with some cases where there has been chronic bed bug hitchhiking from urban areas into rural communities and tribal areas. So that's largely my experience to this point. Having said that, I want to impress upon you that I am also here to listen. So if you have a particular issue and you would like to have some further discussions on that issue, My email address is at the bottom of the slide, and I would be happy to talk with you to help you perhaps make a solution. A lot of strategies were mentioned by Dr. Anderson, and it's more often the balance and how you use these different techniques that is important, and not just all of the techniques that you could possibly use. Put this slide up because this is going to be the crux of the talk. And I really want to impress upon you that within living spaces, within the apartments, within a single home, within a bedroom, I want you to realize that bed bugs can be eliminated from the living space. It can be tough to do at times, but if you're generally thorough enough with your control efforts, you will get control and bed bugs can successfully be eliminated. When we're talking about multiple properties, for example, apartments that in a multifamily housing type situation where we have a number of apartments together, or within a community where we have a number of houses together and people are moving in between those houses, it can be tougher to eliminate the bed bugs completely. However, we can substantially reduce the population and we can prevent them from reoccurring. Now, the key point here for bedbug infestations across properties is the more you can reduce the new infestations that are happening, the better you can get an overall reduction and hopefully potentially elimination of the bedbug issues across different properties. So I really want to impress upon you that within living spaces, bedbugs can be eliminated, and across different properties, across different homes, they can certainly be reduced to the point where they're almost negligible in number and significance. And these two aspects I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail. And the first one, of course, is within living spaces, they can be eliminated. And the main thing that I would say out of all of the things that have been mentioned by Dr. Anderson, the key point that I want to impress upon you is each time you go in to deal with a bedbug issue within a living space, you have to expect that the control methods that you're going to be used are thorough enough and extensive enough to deal with all the problems and pockets of infestation that you could possibly deal with. Bed bugs like to cluster around sleeping areas and resting surfaces where humans are going to be. However, at some point, they're going to sort of fragment off and go to different areas of the room because they want to continue at a level that people are not going to readily notice them. There's some complicated biology going on here, but essentially they like to go into smaller groups. They don't like to stay around in one big group. So when you go into a living space to control them, expect to do thorough control methods and extensively across areas automatically. If you expect that you're going to have thoroughness and extensiveness in your control plans, whatever tools you use, you'll get success. After you deliver a control method, we need to monitor and recheck to make sure that that control was successful. And I'll go into that in a couple minutes. So I just want to summarize the mainstream types of control methods that are used for getting rid of bed bugs out of a living area. Again, Dr. Anderson has mentioned a lot of different techniques, and certainly some of those fit into around these mainstreams. But these are going to be the principal ways that you're going to reduce the bed bug issues. The key thing that I really want to press upon you is if you're dealing with multifamily housing, work with the residents, don't blame the residents. As soon as a technician or as soon as a manager starts to blame the residents for the problem, automatically the war is likely going to be lost with the bed bug issue. We have to put the focus directly on the bed bugs and have the residents work with us as much as possible to get rid of them. And I know some of these areas can be quite complex in the amount of stuff that's in there, but you can still get control even if we were dealing with places like you see in these two pictures right here. So the first mainstream method of controlling bed bugs is through the use of heat. And this is where we're going to heat the interior of the room, or if we are using an enclosed chamber type heat, we're going to heat the area up to about 122 degrees Fahrenheit. This can be tough in places, and there's been a couple of companies that have developed heat generator units that generate electricity in enough amperage and voltage to permit multiple styles of these heaters or furnaces into the room. By using this type of a generator, we don't have to worry about where our source of power is coming from. We know that the power generated in that generator is going to deliver enough power to run the heaters and run the fans in that area. These systems can be expensive. And in initial discussions, particularly with communities that have casinos on them, there was some discussion initially of, can the casino buy one of these to support control within the hotel areas where bed bugs might be a problem? And then when it's not in use, it could be used in the community with some people having training. So that's an option that you might want to think about. Again, delivery of heat is one thing, but spreading that heat around to different areas to make sure that you get the critical temperature in all possible areas is a critical consideration when you're dealing with heat treatments. There are a number of temperature type monitoring devices that either come with the equipment, or you can use a handheld unit. Here you see a handheld unit that is focusing in on an area of the mattress, and we could tell that it's at about 129 degrees Fahrenheit. That's fairly warm. That's above the critical temperature for controlling bed bugs of 122 Fahrenheit. So, that's a good way to check. Keep in mind, though, when you do go into a heated area like that, we want to make sure that person going in has their time monitored and they're coming out of those areas as well. For areas where a trailer that size would not be practical, there are pieces of equipment that use the existing power around the area. You just have to do some planning because, as you can see, this heater unit requires 4 cables to deliver power to the fan as well as to the heater and develop enough heat. So we're looking for multiple areas where we can tap off electricity to handle these things. We're looking probably in around the neighborhood of about 60 amps to run enough fans and to run enough heaters to heat areas that need to be heated. So these are areas where if you have a community that is using predominantly float planes or fly-in planes, these are going to be a lot more portable to get into those areas to heat those buildings. Although you may have to run extension cords between houses if you say only have a 60 amp panel that's servicing that house. Now the challenge for heat, as I mentioned, people talk about materials that you can't heat, and yeah, there's a consideration there, but that's relatively minor compared to the other things that they can heat. You still have to keep that in mind, the prescription medications, crayons, that sort of thing. The cost is probably the biggest thing. With the generator trailer and the heaters, you're probably looking between $75,000 and $150,000, and basically that's a ready-to-use unit. The solar units that plug into multiple areas are going to cost around $15,000 for a kit, but then there's more work that's involved, but it's more portable to use. As long as you get that power supply straightened out, this system will work quite well. The distances to move equipment, of course, is important. If you're looking at these large generators, you're looking at commercial or a 3/4 ton or a 1-ton truck to move those. And again, if you don't have that in the area, then it's going to be difficult to move that generator. Community participation is often important, both in terms of funding, but also for coordination of control. We want to make sure that we're just not sort of chasing this infestation around the community, but we're using this unit in a logical and thorough manner that we remove bed bugs from all of the properties and monitor to make sure that the bed bugs aren't there. Residual insecticides are still needed with this type of equipment. You'll be having to treat areas around the interior perimeter where the heat no longer is and the walls are relatively cool if they're not being heated on the other side. Dr. Wang will talk about steam, but I just wanted to point out that steam is a portable measure, but there's a little bit more effort. It's very good for replacing the short-acting or contact insecticides in some areas, and I'll let him cover that in with greater detail. Dr. Anderson went through and talked about insecticides, about the label being the law and the registration number being on the products that are labeled for bedbug control. I just also want to point out there's maybe some application rules in tribal communities that might be a little bit different than the state regulation because of self-governance. And in some cases, some of the tribal communities have arrangements with the state to share their regulations by agreement. Not going to talk about the specific products available. Again, if you want to discuss that, I'm happy to do that at a later date. But there's key things, and Dr. Anderson mentioned the different formulations that are available. I would say if you're going to use insecticides in each of these living spaces, you require three formulations. You require a short-acting or contact insecticide, a residual insecticide, and a dust insecticide. And you can look on the label for how each are classified. Essentially, short-acting insecticides are labeled for a variety of places, but they're labeled for mattresses and chairs and areas where there's a risk of direct contact by humans. And so if you were to look at this particular room and remove the bedding and other fabrics that can be laundered, then you've got the bare mattress and box spring that can be treated with a short-acting insecticide if you require it. In particular, the mattress, the chair surfaces, and some areas of the floor can be dealt with. Of course, you can use a vacuum, as mentioned by Dr. Anderson, on the floor, but you can also use a short-acting insecticide if you don't have a vacuum. Residual applications. Now, this is where you're putting an insecticide onto a surface and it's drying, if it's liquid, and then it's remaining in place and remaining to be active, so bed bugs will pick it up and end up with a lethal dose. So again, we remove the bedding to be laundered, and depending on the label, you would treat the areas, the box spring and the frames behind headboards, behind pictures and furniture, inside furniture, and then under chairs are another area. So these are areas which are not likely to be touched by humans on a sustained basis. But if bed bugs were to get up in there, they would pick up a lethal dose before they get onto the bed. Pest applications are generally reserved for bedbug control in areas that are voids or cracks and crevices that you're not really going to see the application. Dust applications are fairly obvious, and we want to put those into areas where we need sustained long-term control on residual efficacy. So if we can't seal these areas, then consider using dust inside the areas. Here's some bed bugs that are in the plug behind the striker plate around the electrical plug. Please keep in mind, if you're applying in these areas, do not use a duster that has a metal tip. We need to use plastic tip, and preferably with the power off. When using insecticides, always keep in mind that one thorough application with success is really better than ongoing problems with partial applications. If you treat thoroughly with the expectation of treating it one time, there's a very good chance that you'll get rid of a lot of bed bugs, and likely for long term, if you do some extra monitoring, you can verify that that happens. If you add the vacuum to it, then you can really cut down on the number of bed bugs that you have to deal with by insecticides, so that the insecticides are mainly used as a backup mop-up operation rather than a principal first strike operations. When using insecticide, always think, be thorough with your applications. Apply to the extent that the label will permit you, and that's critical. When you're doing treatments, you need to account for everything. So this is where we're going to kick in the clothes dryer or a full laundry cycle, as Dr. Anderson mentioned. You see bed bugs on this sock. You can't spray the sock with insecticides. It'd be much better to go into a clothes dryer or go through full laundry cycle so that you can get rid of the bed bugs. You can see the advantage of heat treatments here. You've got all these clothes and everything like that, and there's some things that you can't wash and they need to be dry cleaned, or you have to put them into a dryer under a dry heat. This shows you the advantage of using a heat treatment where you can limit your insecticide applications and you can really hammer the heat into these areas and get rid of bed bugs in that way. But the key point here on the slide is make sure you're accounting for everything with these applications. There are strategies for controlling bed bugs by hand, and again, Dr. Anderson mentioned those, and they are on the website that I have if you need more step-by-step instructions on how to do that. You can reduce bed bugs quite a bit by control by hand, and if you do that repeatedly, you can knock them back quite a bit. Can you get rid of them altogether? Maybe if you had a small infestation, but it's going to be awfully tough to do that. So this is available. It can be effective, much more effective than, say, using like a pyrethroid or permethrin insecticide by itself. You can get rid of a lot of bed bugs that way. And the reason I'm saying the pyrethroid or permethrin is that there are a lot of bed bugs that are resistant to those types of products. Of course, follow-up and monitoring is an important aspect, and Dr. Anderson mentioned that, and I'm sure Dr. Wang is going to continue on with that. And I wanted to show up after you do the treatment, putting these things in place, monitoring further activity, being able to spot the infestations that might be coming back is a good way to further suppressing the infestation. Okay, across properties now, this is between different properties, say between two apartments or across homes. And I bring this up because there's been a lot of properties damaged because people have decided to take control into their own hands, not understanding what they're doing. This one was a major fire started because of the use of isopropyl alcohol that Dr. Anderson had mentioned previously. So when we talk about across the properties, again, going back to part one, within properties, we need to make sure within those living spaces, we get control. Okay. Then we have to be aware of the paths that bed bugs can travel. We have to notify residents that bed bugs can happen and who to call. And then adjacent apartment inspection and hallway monitoring is another step that you might want to consider as well. Again, it's not about blaming residents. It's about finding those pathways that bed bugs are using to get into areas. Again, as soon as you start looking for who's to blame for bringing the bed bugs in, you've lost the battle. Bed bugs will just be a bane in your life for a long, long time. So we need to get past that. We need to realize that they could get in and someone might have brought them in, but we need to focus on the bed bug infestations, not necessarily who's to blame and who's going to try and bear the cost, because that just does not work. Realize that bed bugs are excellent hitchhikers, and all of these lists in this area around the home are possible areas where bed bugs can be picked up and brought home in a number of different pathways, and even hotels and that. But from the point of view of tribal communities, there's two that I've worked with that have seemed to be a particular issue. The bus companies that are providing the customers to the casino, these buses can often become infested, and they can continually seed their customers with bed bugs and bring them into the casino and hotel. And that becomes a problem because for the casino, the bus companies are actually the customer of the casino. So having to tell your customer, the bus companies, that they're bringing in bed bugs, that has to be done fairly carefully. But again, realizing we're not here to blame, we're trying to stop an ongoing importation of bed bugs into the community. And if it's coming through the casino like this, that's what you have to start looking at, making discussion points with that. The other place where I've seen bed bugs routinely come into tribal communities is through communities that are isolated. They're relying on small aircraft, small airplanes. And when they come into populated areas, they're coming in and visiting, they're picking up bed bugs at hotels, and then they might transition them or transfer them to the small airplanes themselves before ultimately the bed bugs get into the home. So trying to figure out how we deal with this cycle is important. Again, it's a matter of asking the hotels, are they doing work to make sure that they're preventing bed bugs from getting into there? Are we explaining to community residents that when you stay at a hotel, you need to inspect for bed bugs and prevent them from carrying them home? We want to make sure that the airplanes are inspected as well to make sure that they're not becoming a point source, just like the bus companies, for transiting bed bugs into an area where they can be picked up by residents and then ultimately get into their home. Always keep in mind, these homes are not just isolated, but they form a web of pathways that can enable bed bugs to easily find a source and start feeding the community with bed bugs. And so we have to make sure we shut those down. Once you do that, it's a matter of mopping it up through the multiple homes and your control across properties. Just briefly, let people know in the community and within buildings, bed bugs are a fact of life, just like many other issues that we face in these types of living quarters. And letting people know that they need to be aware of them and that they can happen and that they need to be reporting them is a first critical step to making sure that you get control. Dr. Anderson mentioned adjacent apartment inspections. Here is a map of complaints where each one of these little dots is at the center of an apartment, and we've mapped the relationship of complaints across different apartments. And what you see is it's just not a single apartment, but the probability of complaints is smeared across multiple areas. And you'll notice that there's sections that are not receiving complaints and other places that have high complaints. So you've got to realize that doing these adjacent apartment inspections are critical. No two ways about it. Just as critical as doing the thorough applications within each apartment. looking across to adjacent apartments is just as important. One of the things that we've been trying and we found some success in, besides the monitoring in the apartments, is in apartment buildings, is looking at what's happening in the hallways. Both cockroaches and bed bugs will move in between facilities by coming out of the door and down the hall, or out of the door and across the hall to the next living space. So putting these traps in the hallways actually is a good way to figuring out if there's a hotspot without disrupting the residents within the apartments on a regular basis to do inspections. So that's one thing that we've been trying, and it seems to have a useful work in terms of finding these point sources that are not being reported. Not all people will report bed bugs for a number of reasons. So if you can detect them in the hallway, you can start looking and isolating your efforts to areas where bed bugs are prevalent. So to summarize, within living spaces, bed bugs can be eliminated. Across properties, you can certainly go a long way to reducing them and hopefully eliminating them, depending on the complexity of the situation that you're dealing with. For further information, I have a website, bedbugs.umn.edu. And for agencies and communities or people that are facing unusual circumstances, there's my email address. Thank you very much for your attention, and I really appreciate being invited by the EPA to provide this information to you. I would like to now turn it over to Dr. Changlu Wang to finish off the presentation.
Thank you, Steve. So in this part of the seminar, I will discuss the urban bedbug challenges. So in this seminar, I will discuss how to combating bedbugs in urban housing with limited resources, and some of the challenges that are specific to low-income housing, and how you can set up effective contracts in order to improve the current bedbug control. Then I will also provide some websites for further information. First, I wanted to show you two graphs showing the bedbug survey we conducted in New Jersey. The left chart shows the 4 cities that we surveyed in 2014. In each city, there is a housing authority. We conducted building-wide bedbug inspection in the low-income housing. We inspected more than 2,000 homes, and among them, 12% had bedbug issues. This rate is very high compared to the rest of the society. In 2018, we surveyed the 4 cities again, including Patterson, Jersey City, Linden, and Trenton. Trenton is the capital city of New Jersey. Again, in each city, we surveyed the low-income housing by placing monitors, doing visual inspection, and interviews. We surveyed a total about 1,700 units, and among them, 9% had bedbug infestations. So from 2014 to 2018, you can see the infestation rate reduced slightly. And we found that bedbug is the number 3, the most common urban pest. So the number 1 is cockroaches, number 2 is rodents. So just like the cockroach, bedbugs seem to be a chronic pest in the low-income housing communities. There are many challenges that exist in the low-income communities in terms of pest control, especially the lack of financial resources is one of the most common factors, I think, that contributed to the high prevalence of bedbugs. The second factor may be the lack of cooperation or inability to cooperate by the residents. This is common in that there are some senior citizens, they just couldn't collaborate because they are physically or mentally incapable. And how we can address these issues will be very important to reduce the current bedbug issues. Because of the lack of financial resources and also the low efficacy of the current pest control service, so many residents tend to control bedbugs themselves. And when they control bedbugs, most people first try to use different pesticides. One of the popular products I found in homes is the Hot Shots bedbug and flea spray. This spray is very cheap. It costs maybe only $10 per gallon, but unfortunately, it's not effective for controlling bedbugs. And in fact, many of the sprays that are available on the market are not very effective because the resistance issues. And this resident used 10 gallons of spray in this one-bedroom apartment within 12 months period, plus some other sprays. But still, at the end of 12 months, the apartment still had plenty of bedbugs. If you look at the background, this box spring that's covered with the encasement has many black stains. Those are from the bedbug infestation. And when one product doesn't work, people try to use multiple products. Here you can see that one resident used 5 different sprays for controlling bedbugs. In the middle, the blackjack and the combats do not have a bedbug label, but still the residents use for controlling bedbugs. And because the insecticide resistance issues, these products are not very effective for controlling bedbugs. And when people use these sprays over and over again, they would leave large amounts of residues in the home and then creates the human exposure risks and then can negatively affect people's health. So applying pesticides not only ineffective, but also creates environmental risks. We also found that most people are not very educated about how to apply the pesticides. For instance, the left picture shows one person used the dust on this sofa, and you can easily see that when the person sits on the sofa, the dust will get onto the clothing, get into the air, and people may breathe. It can be very dangerous. And on the right side, you can see a sofa that was treated with a liquid spray, and then the dry residue formed over this seam, and it's very likely that the people can touch these residues. So how to apply chemical so that it's both effective and safe would also need to be educated. And many residents tend to apply spray or household cleaning products, such as on the left side, you can see a person used bleach solution to treat his sofa. As a result, the sofa has a lot of stains. On the right side is the metal bed frame that became rusted after many times of the spray. I also found that probably 10 to 20% of the homes have pest repellers. There are many different pest repeller products on the market. None of them work. So it's completely waste of money, but many people continue to use them. So we really need to educate people how to select products that are safe and effective. Many people try to use house cleaning products, such as the Lysol kitchen cleaner, to treat bedbugs. One resident used hot pepper on the floor to repel bedbugs. You can also see some rodent droppings. So this apartment had both bedbugs and mouse. And one resident used this medicine placed on the headboard to repel bedbugs. And I also found that many homes use mothballs placed between the mattress and the box spring all around the bed to repel bedbugs. And some people use dryer sheets to repel bedbugs. So there are many different home remedies people try to use to control bedbugs. Another concern or challenge in the low-income housing is the lack of cooperation or inability to cooperate, because some people do not want other people to come into their home, even though they may have bedbugs, because they want to do the control themselves, or they just don't care. Then there are also elderly people who are either disabled or physically incapable of doing the preparation, such as laundering, decluttering, can take labor, and some people just couldn't do themselves. Then the housing staff or the management really need to monitor these apartments, make sure that the infestations are taken care of instead of leaving them untreated. Otherwise, the bedbugs in this apartment may become the source of new infestations. And we observed many times that this is the case, that some apartments were infested for many years, then the whole building always had bedbugs. The longest infestation we found is 8 years in the city. Only after we treated the apartment for 3 hours, then the bedbugs were gone. So you really needed to actually have some staff help in order to take care of this apartment. Sometimes you may see that apartments may have very complex furniture. such as the sofa bed on the left. This sofa bed has so many potential hiding places that it's very difficult to find bed bugs and also very difficult to treat because all the fabric surfaces on the sofa bed and the manifolds, it's very difficult to inspect and very difficult to reach to the deep hiding places during the treatment. So once this sofa bed become infested, it's really hard to get rid of all the bed bugs. Then if it's possible, I would suggest get rid of these complex furnitures. Some furniture has a lot of wood, say this bed with this wooden board, this bed frame, or a sofa without legs. All these kind of furniture may potentially have bed bugs hiding in difficult to reach areas. There are many non-chemical and cost-effective methods the residents or the staff can use to control bed bugs. One of those methods is encasement. Installing zippered encasement is a very effective method to reduce bed bugs because once the bed is encased, it will reduce the potential harborages. It makes the inspection easier, also makes the treatment easier. Once you encase the bed, then you can place the interceptors under the bed legs to detect the bed bugs and also prevent bed bugs from traveling between the bed and the floor. There are two types of encasement, fabric or vinyl. Both work. Fabric is more comfortable, but also more expensive. And people I saw use both kinds. In low-income housing, we found that people use plastic encasement more often than the fabric. So here we surveyed more than 1,000 beds in 3 different cities. The orange bar shows 5 to 7% of the beds have fabric encasement, and 34 to 61% of the bed had plastic encasement, even though the plastic encasement is not comfortable and easy to tear. But many people actually use plastic encasement because it's more affordable. And they use this not only for bed bug protection purposes, they also use that for protecting their bed. Only about 34% to 61% of the bed do not have encasement. So the adoption of encasement actually is quite common in the low-income communities. And we hope that more people would use encasement in order to prevent or control bed bugs. Besides the low cost, vinyl encasement has another advantage over the fabric encasement. That is, plastic is smooth and bed bugs do not like to stay on smooth surfaces. So vinyl encasement is much less likely to be infested than the fabric encasement. So over time, the bed bugs can still be found on the fabric encasement along the seams, and then you have to inspect. But for vinyl encasement, you really have to turn over the bed. So once you install the encasement, you don't have to leave the bed in order to inspect for bed bugs. So that's another advantage of using the vinyl encasement. There are other non-chemical methods that can also be very important for bed bug management. Dr. Anderson talked about putting the items in plastic containers or garbage bags is very important to reduce the potential bed bug hiding sites. Just remember that before you putting them into those plastic bins, you want to make sure they are clean and there are no bed bugs. So after you declutter, especially declutter around the bed and the sofa, then you would reduce the potential bed bug hiding sites and make the bed bug control much easier. Laundering and hot drying are very useful methods. And if the cost is the issue, you can skip the laundering, but at least do the hot drying. Hot drying for 30 minutes is enough to kill all stages of bed bugs. Hot laundering actually is not necessary to kill all the bed bug stages. So do not rely on laundering itself. Always do the hot drying for the bed bug control. We found that using steam is a very convenient and effective method to control bed bugs. It can kill bed bugs instantly. There are different kinds of steamers. The consumer grade steamer can be as little as $70 per piece, or the professional steamers that can cost from $700 to $1,500. And if, say, you have a building with often bedbug infestations, I would suggest invest a steam machine so that staff or the residents can use the steamer to treat bedbugs. The steam can be used in more places than insecticides, such as the bed and sofa, chairs, and the steam can be used to treat all those areas. But for insecticides, there are a lot of limitations, plus insecticides are less effective than the steam. The only thing you have to consider is that the steam doesn't have a residual effect. So once you steamed, you may want to go back and check again after 1 week or 2 weeks to check if there are still any bedbugs left. So by repeating the treatments, steaming itself may get rid of all the bedbugs in the apartment. Another tool you may want to consider is a vacuum machine. Especially you have a lot of old signs like dead bedbugs, skins, and also live bedbugs. So you can use a vacuum machine to remove those bedbugs so that in the future you may not confuse with old infestation and new infestation. And when you do the vacuuming, you may want to put a nylon stocking at the end of the attachment so that the bedbugs will be contained in this stocking. And after the vacuuming, you discard this stocking so that the bedbugs will not contaminate your vacuum machine. And it's easier that you can move to the next apartment without the concern of the bedbugs stay in the vacuum machine and crawl out later and infest another unit. There are also containerized heat boxes available. Some of them cost as little as $200, some maybe $500, depends on the size. Compared to the whole house heat treatment, this is much more affordable. So if you have small items such as luggage, shoes, books, electronics, toys, etc., you can place them in the box and heat for 4 to 8 hours. And that's enough to kill all stages of bedbugs. For people who travels a lot, or people tend to visit infested units a lot, then you might want to consider to have one of those boxes. You plug into the outlet, just run for 4 to 8 hours, which is very convenient to debug all those materials that cannot be washed. It's more convenient, basically, than using other methods. Besides the heat, there's on the opposite of treatment that is using low temperature. Freezing is enough to kill all stages of bedbugs as long as you keep them in certain time. We found that normal household freezer can kill all stages of bedbugs after 3 to 4 days. Depends how big or how complex is the material. So if you have very compact materials, 4 days would be enough. But if you have loose materials, small items, maybe 1 or 2 days is enough. So it depends on the volume of the material and the freezer. This is actually quite useful because sometimes, say, you only have a pair of shoes or telephone or book want to debug. What you do? So household freezer would be a very economical and convenient method. So you don't have to invest a steamer to control. Or the steamer may not be able to steam the telephone. And one time, actually, the New York City Fire Department asked me how to control the bedbugs in the gear the firefighters use. Because their gear is heat sensitive, they cannot use the heat to treat their firefighters' gear. So eventually, they bought several freezers to freeze those gears, which actually is quite a safe and economical method for people who often have to visit homes with potential bedbug infestations. We also found that many people actually don't have reactions to bedbug bites, or they don't have good eyesight. They cannot identify the bedbugs themselves. So during the building-wide survey, we found 49% of the residents who had the bedbugs were unaware of the presence of bedbugs in their apartments. So it is very critical that for buildings with known bedbug history, you should do building-wide inspections at least once a year to detect the infestation early. Otherwise, you may have many infestations that will go untreated for long periods of time, then you may have higher infestations, then become more difficult to eliminate. For conducting building-wide inspection, we found the most cost-effective method is to first conduct a brief visual inspection of the bed and sofa, and if you find signs or you suspect bedbugs may be present, then you put the climb-up interceptor under the bed legs. Then come back 2 weeks later to check those interceptors. So by doing this combination, we found that you can identify at least 90% of the infestations, which is much more effective than visual inspection alone, more effective than canine inspection, and also more effective than interviews. So building-wide inspection with a combination of brief visual inspection plus interceptor is the most effective method for building-wide inspection. So once you find the infestations, to eliminate the infestation actually can be very challenging. So we found that in low-income housing, average number of visits to eliminate an infestation was 7. And then the number of visits required can vary between how long the infestation has already been there. So for existing infestations, it took an average 8 visits. For new infestations that occurred later, they only required 2 visits. So it is very important that you do the periodic inspections, find them early, and then treat immediately. This will reduce the number of visits required. So for building managers who want to get a better results in their bedbug management, I would suggest that they revise their contract language so that they ensure the elimination of infestations. For example, specify that using interceptors to monitor bedbugs because it's more effective than visual inspection, more effective than the interviews. Then for each infestation, follow up every 14 days until no bedbugs are found in interceptors or by visual inspection for 2 visits. Many times 1 or 2 visits are not sufficient. You want the contractor to ensure the bedbugs are eliminated before they stop treatment. And thirdly, designate a staff to do the quality assurance inspection to ensure that bedbugs are eliminated. This is basically another method to ensure that bedbugs are indeed eliminated so that you wouldn't end up getting the complaint again later. And if the bedbugs are still present, the apartments have to be treated again, regardless of how many times. So you want to force the contractor to do a good quality control so that every time you pay, you want the bedbugs are indeed eliminated. Otherwise, you have to pay again and again. For housing staff, you may have to consider that assisting the residents who have some disabilities or who are unwilling to cooperate. Because if you leave those apartments untreated, then you end up having high infestation levels and you have a spread of bedbugs. So you may assist them by laundering, decluttering, or you use a pick box to help them treat some items. So in summary, if you want to set up a good bedbug contract, you may want to build up these elements. First, you may request a price for proactive inspections of the building. Use both monitors and visual inspection to determine the presence of bedbugs. The treatment should be based on a combination of non-chemical and chemical methods. Because chemical methods are not very effective, always require the contractor to use steam, use encasement, interceptors, and possibly other non-chemical methods. And then exhaustive preparation requirements should be prohibited. I listed here because many people do not want to do the exhaustive preparation, or they are incapable, or even they can. They don't know how to prepare. In theory, you don't need this kind of preparation because preparation actually can help disturb bedbugs and make the treatment more difficult. So very little preparation should be needed. And lastly, you want the contractor to use certain elimination standards, such as using the monitors. And then you can ensure that you get good results after they treated the units. For more information, you can find the Rutgers bedbug webpage. And you can also write me an email. I'll be glad to answer your questions. My email is my first name plus w@rutgers.edu. And also, I want to thank your attention, thank EPA for inviting me for this webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Wang, for that informative presentation on controlling bed bugs in multifamily and low-income housing that can be a part of an IPM program. This concludes our webinar. We would like to thank Drs. Anderson, Kells, and Wang for sharing their bedbug management experiences with us. To our many attendees, we appreciate your participation and hope that you will join us for future IPM webinars. Have a great rest of your day.